Wild camping is a great hobby which can benefit your physical and mental health. Starting off though can sometimes be a little tricky as there are so many things to consider. If you're thinking of getting out there and trying it, then here are some tips which you may find useful in those early days. So, top tips for wild camping. Always make sure somebody knows where you're going. Whether that's giving your GPS coordinates via WhatsApp or Google Maps, just make sure somebody is able to know where you are. If you have a GPS tracker, then great, but just make sure the basics are done. You know, if the wheel comes off and you need help, somebody's going to need to know where you are. So just make sure that's always a priority. When you begin wild camping, it always helps to write a list of those items that you take and then have that list ready for the next time. Just makes everything easier when you're packing for that second wild camp. And then you can scratch things off that didn't work well for you and add new bits. But it's always then good to have that to just refer back to as you continue your adventures. Always make sure that you plan ahead in terms of the weather. Make sure you're using those weather apps, and also Mountain Forecast is a very good app to use to check out what the weather's going to be like on the hill you're on, because often the weather can be very different up on the hill compared to down below. Know your tent well. Make sure you practice with it, even if it means putting it up in the garden, your living room. Get to know it, because once you're out there and you're setting up camp, the weather conditions might not be favourable and you're going to need to be quick in order to take shelter. So make sure that that new tent you've got, you know inside out. For a first wild camp, I'd recommend finding somewhere to pitch not too far away from your car, so that if you need to, for whatever reason, you can get back to your car quickly, whether that's to pick up some more gear, change some stuff out, or simply to bail and decide to continue another time. But don't go too far away from your car on that first wild camp. That way you feel safer and you'll have more confidence, and then as your confidence grows, you can then take things a bit further. Now this may sound like an obvious one, but make sure you can keep hydrated. So whether or not that means taking enough water for what you need for your drinking and cooking, or making sure you've got a suitable water filter, and research the availability of a water source nearby, so that if you do run out of water, you've always got access to it. Because running out of water when you're miles from anywhere isn't a good thing. The next one is a bit of a tricky one. Now, it's the whole idea of taking gear and how much to take when you're starting out. Now in some cases, it's a good idea to get your gear, pack it all up, and see how it goes. And then judge the effectiveness of it all as you're using it. And then you can kind of condense your choices and make your gear lighter. But then, if you start out by taking everything you've got, and that gives you a heavy pack, you know, it may put you off because your bag's too heavy and you realise that actually, I didn't quite enjoy that. So it's a fine line between just taking enough to give you a comfortable wild camp and not taking enough. So it's fun. Invest in some good waterproofs. The last thing you want is to be arriving at camp soaked, wet, cold, knowing that you've got the whole night to get through whilst you're all damp. So good waterproofs are a must. And then when you get to camp, you can change into your comfortable clothing and enjoy the evening. When you arrive at camp, don't be in a rush to put up your tent. Take your time. Look around at the ground, see if you can find a flat area. Try and make sure there are no loose rocks that could damage your tent or could make a night's sleep uncomfortable. If you have a freestanding tent, then that's a lot easier to move it and put it where you want it to go. But if not, just take your time and think carefully about the level ground and the flat spots to make your night comfortable. So the next tip is, think carefully about where the wind is coming from. So look at mountain forecast and gauge the direction of the wind for the duration of your trip. And then place your tent in a place where you're sheltered, so that if the wind does pick up, then you're protected. Also consider those wind speeds as well. Peg your tent in well and keep yourself safe. So don't worry about spending a fortune on expensive wild camping gear when you're starting off. There's lots of good quality budget gear out there that will get you started. And then you'll see if you like it or not. And if you do, you can then improve your gear and spend a bit more money. The last thing you want to do is spend a fortune, realise it's not for you, and then everything ends up going on marketplace. Invest in the right type of walking gear. Walking boots, walking shoes, the right type of pair. Get them fitted, and they can make a huge difference to your camp. If you turn up to a wild camp and your feet are soaking, or they're hurting because you've not had them fitted properly, it can have an adverse effect to your camp. So it's worth taking the time, maybe paying a little bit extra to get a good pair, and you'll notice they'll last you a lot longer. Also, try and pitch late and try and pitch out of sight, and then that way you'll largely be left alone. The last thing you want is to be all settled and organised and then someone comes and tells you to move. Just make sure that you're following those leave no trace principles, and keep out of the way, look after your pitch, and then take all your rubbish home. So when you're out camping and you're in your tent and you suddenly start hearing strange noises, try not to worry. Those strange noises are probably things like a part of your tent flapping on another bit of your tent, or your guy ropes making a noise. The trouble is, your mind will try and create things that aren't there. So try not to worry. Take a charged power bank, and also make sure that you take the cable that goes with it, because I forgot mine once. That way you can keep your devices charged, your phone, but just be aware that sometimes you might be heading out to a place where there isn't any signal. So just be aware of that also, especially in valleys. Remember your head torch, and take a set of spare batteries in case you need to leave quickly in the night and you have to pack up and find your way down off the hill. Not recommended, but sometimes necessary in certain situations. Another top tip: invest in a good set of dry bags. They usually come in different sizes and different colours, and you can compartmentalise all your gear. So you can even get them to act as a pack liner You can have one for your food, one for electronics, one for your spare clothes, and then eventually you'll get used to what colours you're using for what gear, and everything's organised. Invest in one of these sitting mats. They only cost a couple of quid, and I take mine everywhere I go, and you can use it as a pad to kneel on when you're getting in and out of your tent, and you can sit anywhere, put it on some rocks, even when benches are totally cold and wet through, put one of these down and you'll be fine. And so my final top tip for wild camping is take some form of rubbish bag with you, whether that's a dry bag or just a rubbish bag, and make sure you take everything with you and bin it when you get home. And if you can take more rubbish with you than you came with, even better. So follow those principles of leave no trace. Make sure no one knows you were there. Leave it tidy. And most of all, have lots of fun. I hope these have been helpful, and I'll see you again on another video. Thanks for watching.